Found an interesting article. It looks at why a pirate flag from the Japanese manga series One Piece has become a symbol for Gen Z resistance.
One Piece is just built different, right? My long-standing interest in manga and anime hadn't spread to One Piece. Just because of its enormous duration, I felt intimidated watching more than 1,000 episodes. But recent news all across the globe from the various protests drew my attention to it. Why does exactly One Piece resonate so much with the modern audience? First, it's a deeply political anime.
It is a very political anime.
Anti-establishment and anti-colonial sentiment is extremely prominent throughout the series. Ichiro Oda, the creator of One Piece, doesn't shy away from the description of violence inflicted by the colonizers and marines. So it's no surprise the protesters share the same feelings towards their oppressors. But it's not just about politics of One Piece. There are dozens of different shonen anime series that are extremely popular worldwide, but they don't have the same emotional reach as One Piece. Even pieces from other forms of media pale in comparison with the cultural impact of the adventures of Luffy and his friends. My hypothesis is that One Piece is the most recent example of the most ancient narrative genre, epic genre. Humans have always been preoccupied by stories. Chronicles of the deeds of a hero captured hearts and minds across the planet since the dawn of time. The earliest literary tradition of epic poetry spread around the world and gave birth to many epic poems. The Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia, Mahabharata from ancient India, and Kalevala from Finland are all examples of the local folktales and folk heroes. Luffy fits in the image of an epic hero seamlessly. But these epic stories are so much more than just blind worship of their protagonists. Aristotle, yes, this guy, described epic poems as the imitation of the single action. Probably the two most widely known epic poems, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, follows this exact blueprint. Although Odyssey is centered around Odysseus' travels, there is even more important overarching narrative, the action of homecoming, which involves the whole family of Odysseus. And the same with Iliad. Achilles is on the forefront of author's attention, but the siege of Troy and wrath of Achilles are the leading action of the poem. In other words, the setting, the scale of events, and the journey are or even more important than the glorified heroes. And I would argue that One Piece easily belongs to this conversation, as stands strong against its ancient counterparts. First, the sheer scale of events in One Piece. The adventures of a pirate ship going merry and its inhabitants sprawl over more than 1,000 chapters and episodes. Hundreds and hundreds of characters are involved with the journey of our heroes and the conflicts around them. The world building is immense and filled with so much details that overshadow any ancient epic. But what's even more important is the action inside the series. This feeling of exploration, the overflowing joy of the endless seas, the long journey with your friends and stubborn movement towards freedom, that's the actual body and soul of One Piece. That's what hooked the audience and made One Piece a global phenomenon. Or at least it seems like it to me. Here's the confession. I've only watched a first arc, is Blue Saga. How can I jump to such far-fetched conclusions when I've only finished 53 episodes? But that's exactly the purpose of this video, to show how the beginning of One Piece plants the seeds of the cultural influence that would later grow to conquer the world. And these seeds have names. 5 main characters embody different features of epic characters, and I use them as vessels to explore how a humble pirate series became adjacent to the giants of world literature. One last thing, One Piece doesn't only exist in a worldwide narrative of visual media, but also belongs to the shonen genre. So I'd give my take on how Is Blue Saga holds against other popular anime series. And let's start from my favorite character from the bunch, Usopp. There's no second Usopp. Just look at him. He's so funny looking and unconventional that you're left with no choice but to cheer him on. Overall, the aesthetics of One Piece contrast with the current trends in the shonen genre. In the place of dark and edgy aesthetics so popular today, One Piece blinds the viewers with bright colors and soft, optimistic atmosphere. Even the pastel backgrounds, which were created to save the budget and time, add to the warmth of the series. I cannot help but feel myself homesick while watching it, although my home looks more like this. That's just Denji's hometown. One Piece doesn't care about realism and allows jaw-dropping expressions of emotions. And I mean it quite literally. The standard proportions of the body and rules of physics just stand in the way of excitement that fills every moment of One Piece. Different shapes and species. This world is about diversity. Don't get me wrong, the depiction and design of villains is still horrifying and menacing, especially Arlong's one. But let's not forget, One Piece is more about hope than a looming deadly threat. Usopp fits in these grotesque aesthetics seamlessly. He is funky, clumsy, with the unforgettable mimics, but his biggest treasure is his long nose. It separates him visually from all other characters and gives him the funniest injury, a broken nose. That's just an amazing visual comedy. But he's not just a comic relief character, at least not in the first arc. He feels like the most humane hero in a world of fearless monsters like Zoro and Luffy. Usopp expresses the whole tapestry of emotions. When he found out about the pirates' plan to massacre his village, he was consumed by despair. When he got his ass whooped by the big lips fisherman, humiliation and shame were the emotions that devoured him. But at the same time, Usopp can be a show-off, bragging about Luffy's achievements like his own. That's what makes him relatable. Usopp contemplated the idea of leaving his village for ages, but doubt and fear stopped him. After defeating pussy pirates, he has all the reasons to stay, but he commits to a dangerous journey to challenge himself. Although, it can be a byproduct of Usopp's upbringing, who probably attended Gene Freak's seminars about fatherhood. Usopp is considered to be weak in this world, and his fighting abilities are quite humble in comparison with his crew, but it doesn't weigh him a bit. Every time he's confronting a strong opponent, he's frightened so much that his whole body trembles and his knees are shaking, but nevertheless keeps going and fighting until the end. That's an inspiring message I'm telling myself. Bravery is not an absence of fear, it's the ability to move forward despite the fear. And Usopp is brave. He's in control of his own journey and doesn't allow any opinions to change it. Moreover, Usopp constructs his own fictional reality, and it's not like he wants to escape from his struggles, it's more to uplift others. When his mother is lying on her deathbed, our cute pirate tries to comfort her by lying that his father is coming back, but he is gone. Those seminars are not all for naught. He continues to warn the village about the arrival of pirates, even after her death, reenacting his own version of The Boy Who Cried Wolf. But not for the attention. Usopp commemorates his mother and doesn't let the village to forget about her. The same thing happens with Kaya. He is telling the stories about his fictional heroic deeds to cheer her up a little bit and to help her recovery. Yes, Usopp is a liar in a strict sense of this word, but he lies to relieve the pain and traumatic experience for the people around him. In contrast with him, Klahadore, an antagonist in Usopp's arc, is presented as a lawful and faithful servant, the living manifestation of dignity. But it's only his public persona he uses to earn the trust of villagers, to slaughter them mercilessly. Although, I don't know how you can trust a guy who adjusts his glasses like that. That's a clear sign of sociopath. This opposition between Klahadore and Usopp is the whole point of the arc. Neat and fashionable Klahadore perceived to be trustworthy because of his looks, but deep inside he's a vile human being, while Usopp looks and behavior quite laughable, but he is a kind soul. Usopp refuses to claim his victory, so he wouldn't bother the inhabitants of a tiny island and keep the idyllic image of their village. He's committed to his role of a fool, so everybody can sleep without a worry. He pretends to be an airhead because he cares and appreciates people around him. Usopp is the great pretender, and he pretends for our sake. Every shonen should have its resident pervert. A slightly pervert Jiraiya, insufferable Kon. Two old dudes from Dragon Ball and Ranma 1-2, Hisoka. Sanji doesn't show the same degree of perversion, at least yet, but it's the same archetype. But what Sanji does have in abundance, unlike already mentioned characters, is the drip. I didn't expect the characters in One Piece look so fashionable. I'm not a big fashion guy, but it's clear how much time and effort was spent on the design of their clothes. Let's start from Sanji. His outfit is immaculate. A black suit with a tie, blue shirt with black pinstripes, and of course, those massive boots. Their clothing design tends to highlight some of their personal traits and their background. Usopp wears something practical with lots of pockets. Nami's outfit helps her to manipulate men and at the same time doesn't constrain her movements. Luffy wears clothes that he found in a trash can. Overall, all the outfits seem to match the tropical climate of the show. Lots of shirts. My favorite ones are Arlong's yellow bare chest shirt and Zoro's shirt from the same arc with an ornament. Even side characters have no business to look so good and stand out from a bland background mess, so typical for such long series. Sanji's black suit can be explained by the desire to always look fly, to seduce naive girls, but also can stem from his background. His character is built around a trauma, and how this trauma shapes your whole personality. There's no mother figure around him. He's surrounded by an old pirate and a bunch of cooks. He's longing for a woman's attention, because he's looking for a mommy. Or maybe I just went way too deep with the psychoanalysis. But there's one more, much more prominent and obvious mental trauma that clearly impacted Sanji's worldview. This life-changing moment happened when he was still a little kid. After a pirate raid and subsequent storm, he got entrapped on a small rock in the middle of the ocean. His neighbor turned out to be red-legged Zeph, who attacked a civilian ship that Sanji was on, but then salvaged him from drowning in stormy waters. The main issue soon became a lack of food. Sanji, starving and isolated with his own thoughts, decided to hunt Zeph down for the remains of the food. That's when the shocking revelation has happened. Zeph left all the food to a little boy and severed his leg to feed himself. This sacrifice stunned little Sanji, who didn't understand the motivation behind such an action. But there was something that united these two strangers, their shared dream to find All Blue, the mysterious sea with fish from all the seas. After being rescued, they've opened a sailing restaurant that would feed anyone in need. This little story demonstrated the very foundation of his character. Food is an ultimate resource that outweighs all other material resources, and Sanji is willing to dedicate his whole life to prevent others from starvation, to prevent them from what he endured himself, the complete loss of humanity. Food in this context is the life itself, which is directly opposite to money, that in this anime means only one thing: death. Cooking is his love language, the only form of communication he mastered. Sanji's cooking allows him to express his emotions, otherwise hidden behind the rudeness and quite creepy attitude towards women. The process of cooking is the only time when he is serious and concentrated. The emotional bond with Zeph, basically his father, was built on their shared passion of cooking, not words. Sanji don't know how to express affection, but he still cares and shows it in his own way, a way that was shaped by the trauma, using the most valuable ingredient of them all, food. He is reluctant to leave the restaurant for his dream. He feels indebted to Zeph and simply afraid to abandon his family. But it's time for a separation. He is an adult boy now. Finally, curiosity prevailed over the fear, and he set off for a journey to find a mythical sea. He is accompanied on this journey with a crew of some passionate individuals who feel the same affection to life, and he cooks for them. Sanji is a lover after all. You still remember that One Piece is a shonen anime, right? Characters and original setting is important, but what really helps to sell a new manga series to the teenage audience of Weekly Shonen Jump is action, non-stop fighting scenes. Power scaling is the bread and butter for a substantial part of an YouTube for a reason. Zoro is a swordsman, the master of a unique three-sword style, and represents the philosophy of a battle. So I name Zoro, in this part of a video about him, responsible for all the action scenes in East Blue Saga. The one thing I heard about One Piece prior to watching it is that it has some serious issues with pacing. I didn't understand what was it about at first, but after the clash with Klahadore, I felt the pain. After all these positive things I've said, I have to offer some negative criticism. The fighting scenes feel so sluggish and slow. It's not on par on the rest of the series. The antagonist's behavior is quite banal, and all the fights adhere to the same logic. Luffy did some stupid shit, Zoro and Sanji stole their opponents until other characters help Luffy to overcome the consequences of his stupid action, and then Luffy triumphantly returns to a battlefield. Also, the characters in this show really like to yap, especially when they are in grave danger. Don't get me wrong, it's not all doom and gloom, it's just pretty generic, and I've expected a little bit more quality. Certain aspects worked out better than the other. I like the design of Don Krieg and his arsenal. The verticality of his fight is superb. The humor in the Erlang's fight is outstanding, and I just can't stay silent about Klahadore's manicure. Real pussy energy. But there's one fight that emotionally stands out above all other. Of course, I am talking about the notorious battle. Buggy versus Treasure Chest Guy. Okay, I'm kidding, it's Zoro vs Mihawk. Although it's really short and doesn't have insane choreographics, the nerve of this fight is so unsettling, and it's not formulaic at all. There's an abyss between their swordsmanship skills, so Zoro is doomed from the beginning. The outcome is clear, but it doesn't disrupt the flow of the encounter, because it's not just plot driven. This standoff is a portrayal of everything that Zoro stands for, an obsessive determination. Just like Sanji, Zoro has his own crippling childhood trauma that shaped his life, but his mental wound manifests itself in a different way comparing to Sanji. His greatest childhood arc rival, Kuina, died in the unfortunate accident and left Zoro with a glaring hole inside of him. She was a driving force behind his progress, and his ultimate objective was to finally beat her. Their final fight wasn't destined to happen, and Zoro made all Kuina's aspirations and dreams his dreams. The power of a promise led to an obsession that propelled his skills even more and made him an extremely formidable opponent. The issue is that the promise of becoming the best swordsman in the world grew into a giant burden for him. Zoro's every action should serve as a commitment to this promise. It leads to him sleeping virtually in every scene that he is not fighting. He is not a talker. Zoro, alienated even from his companions, and silently keeps moving towards his goal. Mihawk acknowledges and respects his determination, so he leaves Zoro alive, but it wouldn't take long before he will put his life on the line once again in a fearless attempt to prove his worth. To himself first and foremost. He willingly gambles his life for a pair of cursed swords, and only gods and fate can stop him. In this sense, Zoro reminds me an ancient tragic hero, someone like Sisyphus. He's obsessively slashing his way through his opponents, hoping one day to become the best swordsman, but it's quite a futile intention. But Zoro can't just stop. The unreasonable expectations are essential for his character, so he will continue to numb his emotion and fight everyone who stands on his way. I challenge you, the viewers, to name more infamous pairing than female characters and shonen anime. It's a fully formed cliche in the shonen community now that most female characters are these tsundere-type cheerleaders that are completely irrelevant to the story. I would argue that this narrative is a little bit overblown. Take Sakura, for example. She is mocked about being useless despite her status of self-proclaimed warrior. But these haters forget that she killed one of the Akatsuki almost by herself. Okay, coming back to One Piece. No more hot takes. In the first arc, we have only one important female character, Nami. Does she represent these common shonen traits? Kind of. She is loud, aggressive, and quite cynical character, but there's something very different about her. Nami's character is a direct result of the political violence, so all these annoying features are to be expected. She is a victim that suffers from being forced to perform different social roles in order to satisfy her oppressor. And it's time to talk about the most praised element of One Piece, world building. The vastness of the series itself implies that the world building is also vast, complicated, and nuanced, but the first arc just introduces us to the Blue Planet and presents quite an incomplete picture about it. There is a massive ocean, the Blue Sea, and a single massive continent, the Red Line, and the Grand Line. Luffy and his pirate crew are heading into the Grand Line because all the riches and treasures of the world are kept there. So if you want to make a name for yourself, that's your destination. In this sense, Grand Line reminds me Mediterranean Sea of Odyssey as a scene for heroes' adventures. While geography of the Blue Planet is quite simple, at least for now, the political organization seems more intricate. I spoke myself an existence of world government as a powerful governing body, but it doesn't make an appearance in the first arc. What does appear is the Marines, the controlling body of this world, or, if we speak frankly, cops of this world. And that's where the interesting turn happens. In Naruto, Bleach, My Hero Academia, and other shonens, the protagonists are glorified police fighting against the evil and enforcing the state's will. The Straw Hats are pirates who metaphorically and physically oppose the police. The Marines are supposed to control the order in the seas, but in reality spread the policies that vividly remind me of colonization. The first real villain in One Piece is the Marine Captain Morgan, who instead of defending his island from the pirates, put all his efforts into creating his own little tyrannical world. East Blue is similar to the Caribbean Sea of the 16th-17th century. Pirates are plundering and terrorizing local population, creating their own safe havens so they can continue their pillage, while cops only care that their exploitation and slave labor are untouched. Where the colonialism appears, racism and violence follow. So many of modern anime series are afraid of approaching racism, partially because of Japan's own rich history of colonialism. Ichiro Oda doesn't conform to such banalities and confronts the issue of racism. The first necessary ingredient for challenging racism is diverse cast of characters. it's so refreshing to see non-Japanese characters, especially when that diversity is essential for the story. Luffy is a proud Fortaleza local who wouldn't tolerate the injustice around him. What Oda really showcased is the mentality of a colonizer. The category of race was invented to rationalize and justify the violent domination of the newly discovered lands. As one of the most prominent researchers of colonialism, Lorenzo Veracini, put it, it is not because someone is black that they are appropriated and enslaved. On the contrary, it is because they are appropriated and enslaved that they are black. Arlong and his crew justify their occupation of a Kokoyashi village by appealing to their racial superiority. Fishmen are physically stronger, can breathe under the water, so Arlong's logic rationally leads to a conclusion that humans should serve fishmen as slaves. But that's what a colonizer wants you to believe. Arlong Park would have been built no matter what. Arlong wanted to become a conqueror of East Blue, and these fairy tales exist only so you, the oppressed, would begin to believe in this twisted ideology and wouldn't even think about the resistance. Nami went through this mental grinder in her childhood. Her adoptive mother, Bellamere, was brutally murdered by Arlong, and then Nami was forced to assist the fishmen pirates due to her exceptional navigation skills. But fishmen didn't just enslave her, they took advantage of her in an even more insidious way. Arlong promised to set her village free if Nami would collect enough money to pay them off and join his crew. This way, she endured all the responsibility for the village that is basically taken hostage, and at the same time kept completely alienated because of her allegiance to Arlong. Nami was brought up with the mentality that any resistance would be dealt with in extreme violence, and her oppressors are not the one to be blamed. They're actually helping her, and Nami should be grateful that she was allowed to join Arlong in his endeavors. Just look at the roads they built, all the infrastructure, the modern technologies they brought along. To your primitive people, you should be thankful for everything.
Je crois qu'on a oublié de nous dire merci. C'est pas grave, ça viendra avec le temps. L'ingratitude, je suis bien placé pour le savoir, c'est une maladie non transmissible à l'homme.
This victim blaming is extremely common while imposing your colonial rule. Nami was made a part of a team, and Arlong mentions that Nami is their friend and a useful human. But there's a clear hierarchy in his crew, so in reality, she's been kept on a leash. Only when she met Luffy and temporarily joined the Straw Hats to eventually swindle them, she finally understood the meaning of the word friendship. The process of recovery from the mindset of your own inferiority takes some time, so Nami relapsed into her cynical patterns and left them behind to return the debt. She got used to carry this enormous burden alone. It didn't wait for any selfless help, but Luffy and company are her real friends. Luffy doesn't have any inferiority complex, so he just plunged forward to save his friend. Her martyrdom turned to be her mental prison that the Straw Hats broke apart. Nami's free now and found people that she can trust and rely on. That's the eyes of a person that finally was able to throw off the shackles of colonialism. Hooray! The power of friendship is victorious again. By the way, where are the Marines who are supposed to prevent mass killings and keep pirates in check? They collected a tribute and sold out to pirates long time ago. Cops, useful as always. I've had a lot to say about shonen protagonists in the previous parts of this video, but Luffy is a type of hero that I referenced even earlier. He's an epic hero. We can compare him to the other shonen protagonists and would be able to find some similarities. He's dumb and always gets into trouble, but that's where something different arises. He just perceives reality in a completely unique way. Luffy is this primal force who, if sets his eyes on something, no one would be able to stop him. Death is an impossible concept for him, so Luffy doesn't even start thinking about consequences of his actions. His gaze is on the One Piece, the legendary treasure that will grant him a title of the King of Pirates. But that's not what he is going after. An adventure with the Straw Hats crew is what's important, not an eternal glory. The whole world of One Piece is watching after his adventure. The title of Pirate King is imminent, just because his will is an ultimate order for the Blue Planet. Luffy is an epic hero after all. That's a religious experience, but more about it a little bit later. His greatest companion to this adventure is the soundtrack of One Piece. I love this soundtrack. Orchestral symphonies are crashing the waves and taking our heroes toward their next challenge. Kohei Tanaka and Shiro Hamaguchi, the composers of the One Piece soundtrack, managed to create a perfect soundscape for the adventurous mood of One Piece. It's not stylized to be akin to pop music and lacks the biggest sin of modern anime soundtracks, the virality of it. But what it does have is the striking historical link to the Ghibli soundtracks and even older classical music, while preserving its uniqueness. In the result, One Piece feels like a grand fable of a past, and not just like a standalone adventure series. It reinforces the epic scale of a story and reminds us that we are ultimately in a fantasy world where everything is possible. That's the world of a kid's lightheartedness, the feeling of a grass under your bare feet, the warm wind that embraces you and carries away to a new adventure of today. The soundtrack is inventive and painfully nostalgic at the same time, and this music deserves a protagonist that embodies these traits, a free teenage spirit who bends the reality to his desires. Hey, it's Luffy, the Gama-Gama Prophet. From the very first episode, he inspires people around him to pursue their desires and live on their own terms. Luffy literally converts his doubters into believers. What else points at his divine status? At Lockdown, he basically inherits the will of the previous king of pirates, Gold D. Roger, and receives a blessing for his forthcoming journey. Luffy went on a pilgrimage to a sacred place, a scaffold, where Gold D. Roger was executed. There, he is captured and awaits for his execution. But mysterious forces of nature are sweeping him away and saving him from the certain death. He needs to lead his group to Grand Line, no matter what, so Mother Nature helps him. Come on, it's so similar to a story of Moses and the crossing of the Red Sea. And that's why Luffy's character is so influential in today's world. It's not that he fights injustice. What's more important is that everything is possible for him. In the very first episode, Luffy proclaims that he will be the next king of pirates and encourages Kobe to pursue his dreams. Luffy denies the existence of fate and proves that we need fearlessness way more than pure strength. In shonen series, power scaling is the ultimate solution to all problems. You can beat your opponent, you can change the world. But maybe our world needs a shining hope more than a sword? We, the victims of constant exploitation and failing political systems, are exhausted from our everyday lives and dying for changes. If you are able to choose how you want your life to be, will it be the same life you have now? For lots of people, the answer is definitely no. So Luffy is a symbol that you can be free. And he doesn't choose to have a boring life, he's striving for adventures. So no wonder we follow him. I would follow him straight down to hell. We're united in our burning desire to be free all across the world, and our solidarity is capable to undermine world government. Just remember Luffy's commandments, and everything is possible. Monkey D. Luffy is our Gama-Gama Prophet, and we are the world crew of Straw Hat's ship, riding the waves to the life we choose.